Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving on to our today's story. I 46 always had a problem with trust. I worked very hard to become wealthy, but that came with a lot of sacrifices, and one of them is keeping your close circle very tight. When you have a lot of money, you get a lot of people who are only interested in you for your money and nothing else. This meant a lot of fake friends, gold diggers, distant relatives asking for help, people calling in favors, and more. Because of this, I'm very selective of the people I spend time with. 10 years ago, I married a fantastic woman who was genuine and couldn't care less about the money I had. She came from a decent, well-off family, so money was never really a problem for her, even though she wasn't rich. We got married and spent amazing years together, and I don't even recall her ever asking me for more money. After 7 wonderful years, she, unfortunately, passed away from cancer. It took me a long time to heal and move on, adding to that the fact that we never had children because I was infertile. I felt so lonely for 3 years, as I had no family left and very few friends. This is usually a time of weakness and easy exploitation by anyone, so I put my guard down. I eventually needed to move on. And even though I didn't want to ever remarry, the feeling of loneliness just killed me and I had to reconsider that decision. One time, at one of the business dinners I was attending, I met a woman who looked similar to my wife. I don't know if it was the resemblance or what, but we immediately hit it off. To this day, I think the only reason I liked her was the subconscious missing of my late wife, and nothing else. We got married shortly after. All of my friends were against the marriage, as she was just an employee in the company, and way outside of my social circle or level. But it's not like she was poor, either. I didn't care that she wasn't rich or didn't hang out in expensive restaurants or wear super expensive clothes. This was the reason I was attracted to my late wife, to begin with, and it worked, so I decided that she was the right one, even though I was completely wrong. At first, everything was perfect, as beginnings usually are. We didn't get enough time to get to know each other before marriage, so the first year of marriage was the honeymoon phase. We rarely fought, she agreed to everything, we had a lot of fun, and things were just peaky. We both couldn't see each other's flaws because we weren't even that used to each other at first. I thought she was perfect because she reminded me of my late wife, and she thought I was perfect because I never said no to her, and did everything she ever wanted, which I realized later was a mistake. After the first year, though, is when I started to notice a few strange things. She started asking for more and more money a lot. I didn't mind at first, but I did find it strange. For some reason, she was taking a lot of money and I had no idea where it was going other than clothes and stuff. She kept telling me about things she was using it for in charity, and events and stuff, and because I was so busy with work, I usually just let her have whatever she wanted and didn't think about it. When she got pushy, though, was when I started to get uncomfortable. One time, she asked me for a large sum of money, and when I asked her what, she said it was for a project she was starting with her friend. When I asked her what the project was, she didn't give me an answer and told me that she would tell me when they started so that she doesn't jinx it. I said okay, and a couple of months later, I asked her what happened to that project and she told me that it didn't work out. I kept demanding that I know what the project was and how she lost that money, but she got angry and jumped to conclusions that I don't trust her or whatever. Something was seriously up, so I asked around and found out that she used that money to pay off a lawsuit between her friend and her husband because the wife owed him a lot of money. When I confronted my wife about this, she went into a frenzy and told me that I invaded her friend's privacy and involved myself in her friend's business, which made absolutely no sense since the money was mine. Anyway, I didn't care and didn't want to keep arguing, so I let it go. But right after the case was settled, the friend's husband came to me, told me that they had a divorce, and complained to me that my wife was the one who encouraged her friend to get the divorce. I know that they were a very happy married couple, so I didn't know what the problem was, but my wife was involved somehow. After that one encounter, I felt my wife trusting me less and less and acting more and more strange. She would constantly act all sad and depressed, and the only way to make her feel better was to buy her stuff. I bought her a brand new Mercedes, and she convinced me to get her a house in her name where her parents can live because their house had problems with the bank. But I later found out that her parents remained in their old house and didn't even move into the new house, which was new and fully furnished and in my wife's name. She kept bleeding me dry with new stuff, which I found odd because she was never the kind who asked for a lot of money in the first place. just like my late wife. Something was up, and even though my friends kept warning me that she might be a gold digger, I didn't want to believe them. It all culminated in one massive event, though that was the worst day of my entire life. We had just gotten into an argument in the morning about, as usual, money. She wanted to travel alone for a whole 3 weeks because I was busy at work, and when I kept refusing, she gave me grief about freedom and being controlling and made a whole deal about the money. Things got heated between us and our voices got loud, but that was it. I stormed off to go to the company and she went outside somewhere. That day, while at work, I suddenly get a bunch of messages and phone calls asking me about the disaster. I had no idea what was going on, but I go on social media and suddenly see my wife posting about how her husband, me, aggressively forces her to have intimacy, even when she doesn't want to, and how that leaves her uncomfortable and reduced to tears. She accused me of assault in front of the thousands of followers we had, and eyes were turning. When I got home, before I could even enter, I see the police at my door and they arrested me for rat pee charges. Things were going so fast that I couldn't even pause to process what was happening, and I had no idea how she could even do that. I spent a night in jail and I demanded to know any details about what happened, and her evidence was a testimony making up fake stories about forced sex. Shockingly, she brought several women whom I know who worked in my company, and even one of the housekeepers who came often, who testified falsely that I had forced myself on them. I was shouting in confusion and anger, and I know that they were all lying and that these women were paid, most likely by her. I had a team of lawyers on my side, but she must have planned this very carefully. She had some strange audio recordings of a man who had a voice very similar to mine, talking to her violently while drunk and trying to get intimate, while she is crying and refusing in the recording. Because the voice sounded so similar to mine, it was taken as evidence and I got a prison sentence. I suddenly found myself in prison in a community I had never even encountered in my entire life, unjustly doing time for something I couldn't even believe someone would think I would do, and heartbroken that it came from my wife. Life in prison was extremely difficult, but I was lucky that I was put in one of the nicer ones, given my wealth and connections. If I had any power outside, this was automatically negated on the inside. I was like an infant, learning how to adapt for the very first time again. I don't know what kind of lawyers she got on the outside, but this was so intricately planned that I wouldn't be surprised if she got the best, meaning the worst in the business. All that money I fed her had to go somewhere, and I couldn't believe the nerve of her to do this to me. Since I didn't have that many friends, I didn't have that many visitors, except Jack. Jack was my longtime friend, even though we barely ever met. He lived in another city, so we would meet whenever he was in town or I was in his, but because we knew each other since we were kids, he was never all that impressed with my money, and that's why we stayed friends. Jack was the kind of guy who would always choose dare when playing truth or dare, and always doing crazy stuff just for the thrill of it. He liked to live an unconventional life, which is why even at 45, he still never got married for more than 3 months at a time. Jack was apparently in town for a long time and he paid me several visits. Each time I told him what happened, he would be more shocked. Over time, I started telling him more about my wife and our marriage and everything that had happened in the first place, and he started calling me crazy and saying that she was an obvious gold digger from the start. He resented her so much that he was willing to do anything to take her down, prove my innocence, and get me out. We needed to hatch a plan, and after a few visits, we came up with the craziest one yet. Jack was always a ladies' man, and he was doing pretty well himself. He had his car dealership, so he never really needed money. Because of this, he was the perfect candidate to marry my wife. We made a plan that he would get close enough to my wife, who was now living in luxury with no one by her side, and try to get as much info from her as possible, and then make her life miserable as revenge. After a few months, things worked beautifully. He would visit me every week and tell me what had happened. He managed to talk her up into some fancy event and they hit it off. It was strange hearing from my best friend that his wedding to my ex-wife was the following week, and I was so happy to hear it. But life can take you on ridiculous journeys sometimes. All my motivation to cope inside prison now hung on this plan's success. Eventually, they did get married and they lived in the house I had bought her and signed in her name. At that point, I had done 6 months of prison time and I had had enough of it. Jack genuinely despised her, since he saw right through her from the very beginning and didn't get the whole honeymoon phase. The most important thing was that she didn't know we were friends and that he visited me in prison. He started asking her about her ex-husband and what had happened, and she gave him the same assault lie she had told the police and the media. Over time, though, he started getting pushy and demanding that she tell him what happened, but she would keep being vague about it. After about a month, Jack started executing our plan. He made a complete 180 turn on her and started treating her harshly. Jack had a much more bitter heart than me, and he knew exactly how to get things out of people. He sniffed around and found out that she had stolen a bunch of money from another ex-husband before, and she couldn't believe that he found out. He started blackmailing her with all of her dirty laundries and told her that they wouldn't get a divorce and that she'd have to stay with him. He told me about how he treated her horribly. He made her stay at home all day just to clean and grounded her. She spent months in her house, unable to leave. He took a bunch of her money and left her with nothing. All he wanted was a recorded confession that she faked the whole ordeal with me so that I can finally be free. But she was so persistent. He treated her even worse, basically as a maid, and even stopped her friends from coming over to visit. He told me that he found so much dirty work she had done, from stealing to extortion to falsely testifying in court, that he kept being shocked at how I married her. One time, he visited me in prison and told me that he was close enough to finally get her. He told me that yesterday, she stood up to him and asked him why he was treating her like his personal pet, and he shouted at her violently. He told her that he only married her for her money and beauty and that he couldn't care less who she was. He told her that he was my rival and that he married her just to spite me in prison. And then he kept being extremely stress-inducing, telling her that he knows she faked the whole story of me sexually assaulting her, and she finally broke down and said yes. While crying and having a nervous breakdown because of his abuse, she told him everything. She told him that she only married me for my money and because that looked like a poor soul looking for anyone to keep him company, and that I was an easy target for her. She told him that I was her 5th consecutive husband and that she had a lot of hopes and expectations about the stuff I'd get her. The house and the car were for her to be able to have something when we got divorced. Also, the whole friend thing and the money was because her friend was also planning on getting divorced from her husband and she needed that money to be able to live on her own afterward. I had directly funded 2 homewreckers and gold diggers. My friend told me not to worry and that now that we have evidence of what she said and did, I would be free extremely soon. I had one question though, and that was how he got her to that breaking point in the first place to confess everything. He told me that he was extremely verbally and even physically abusive. He told me that he embarrassed her and degraded her at literally every opportunity he can get, and even in front of her friends and distant family. To add insult to injury, he told everyone that she had biological problems and that she was the one who couldn't have children and that she would come back later to bite her when her husband wanted a kid. She told him that as soon as she got enough money out of me, she was free to go wherever she wanted. After my friend left my ex-wife in tears and broken down, he started showing everyone exactly what had happened, and he got her entire confession recorded where she said that she framed me for sexual assault just to get money out of it, and be able to live freely and independently in her own house with her car and project. They quickly got divorced, and he pressed charges against her and sent the videos over to prove my innocence. I did go free and I had an intense face-to-face with her in court as she was the one facing charges of falsely accusing me of the whole thing now. I managed to get one word out of her and that was sorry, but it was too late. I told her in front of everyone that she was garbage and couldn't even do anything outside of talking more and spending more. She got prison time for false accusations, and I told her that even when she gets out, I'll sue her so hard that the only way out would be also through the jail. I raised my voice and told everyone that I only married her because she resembled my wife physically, but that my real wife wasn't such a snake. Getting back to my company and the business was hard at first, and I needed to make sure that everything was going smoothly. Even though I spent about a year in prison, it did not feel that long. Now, here is the end of our today's video, and I hope you guys are enjoying my content. So before leaving, you can share your thought about OP's horrible greedy wife, or do like the revenge OP's friend took on her in the comments section. Also, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more revenge stories.